Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. After last week's episode 16 on the voids, I had a interesting experience of a void the last few days. It was like, thanks guys, this is rich. Make a podcast on it and then plunge into a void yourself. But, as usual, working with these concepts, coming to consciousness of them, giving them names, talking about them, made the experience of this most recent void very different. It was easier to identify the illusion. I felt like nothing was happening, nothing was going right, there was no progress. And then I was able to pull up in the middle of it and say, I may not be able to see it on the five senses perspective, but what if things are still all really unfolding even right now? And I asked the Chorus about it because even after making a podcast on it, there's still, of course, things that as a human I want to drill down into further. Listen to episode 7 on how humans learn. Anyways, I asked him, I said, what is the purpose of the void? And they said, to challenge your perception of the present. Isn't that true? When you're sort of in an empty gap in life, and there's nothing really to think about or nothing really to do, or you can't even tell what you want to do next, what you've got left beyond all those busy activities of the mind is the present moment. I hope that helps. Should you be in a void or coming out of a void? Today, we launch into a pretty big topic, the two underlying structures of the entire game board and all the many ways that this plays out in our experiences here. In the book, which I'm getting more and more excited to share with you all, they actually open the book with these two topics. Then here, as you can see, we're already to episode 17 before they've introduced it. I like both, actually. And I think that because we've been able to spend time here on some of the different yet related topics, that this may resonate even more strongly with you. In the first part of the episode, you'll hear directly from the Chorus themselves, and then afterwards we will discuss. See you soon. It was not always that humanity was so limited. You came from a place of infinite love and infinite energy. And gradually, as you resonated with these frequencies of disallowance, you created more and more beliefs that disallowed your perception of the infinite. That is, you gave yourselves an experience of limitation. The two first beliefs that you manifested here are the beliefs in finiteness and insufficiency. That is, that what is available to you in the five senses world is finite. That it cannot, does not show up infinitely in your sensory perceptions. And also, relatedly, that what does show up is often not enough or is just barely enough. combine these two core tenets of your existences, of your manifested realities, of your experience of these frequencies, created essentially the underlying structure for the entire game field. Most specifically, we would like to say that all players who experience any degree of finiteness and insufficiency are on your game board. There is a great deal of these beliefs that you are becoming conscious of. You understand that there are not infinite resources on your planet. You understand that there is not always enough food to go around. You understand that there is just enough daylight in your days to get the things done that you wish to get done. And so, beloved ones, in some ways you are becoming conscious to these aspects of existence. Yet, as usual, we would like to point out larger impacts of these beliefs in the way they structure your day-to-day realities, that there is a great deal about these beliefs that you are yet unconscious to. Understand that as a human goes out into the world, they will automatically, unconsciously, view the things with which they interact from the perspective of finiteness and insufficiency. That is to say, that as they are introduced to a new discovery or a new idea, they will naturally resonate with the incomplete aspects of that idea. They will find the things about it that are not enough or that are limited. It would be difficult for a human of your day and time to come across something new and different and see in it anything that violates these fundamental tenets of the game. However, as you are well aware, humanity is coming across concepts, that is, the possibility of infinite and sufficiency in many of the things that you contemplate and even wish for the future of your beings. You have ideas of infinite energy. You have ideas of enough food to go around. You have ideas of sustainable systems that might not negatively impact your environments as you perceive them. Thus, beloved ones, the fact that you even have a contemplation of these concepts is because you are already lifting off the game. That is, lifting off of the energetic resonance with these fundamental beliefs. What will your worlds be like once you see them through the lens of the infinite? What will your bodies become when you are embodying the idea of the infinite? A great many of you today look for change in your societies. You greatly desire things that are different. And in so doing, from your five senses perspective, you rage against that which is not. Beloved ones, your desires are wholly and completely possible and grounded in your expanding natures. But as the universe is infinite, there will always be things that are not what you desire. Today, because you view that from your five senses perspective, you see in that the finiteness and insufficiency. That is to say, you view only so much room only so much potential available to you all. And thus you compete, and thus you battle, and thus you believe that you must win your way forward, or else that finite space will be taken by something or someone else. As you begin to view this from the perspective of the infinite, it is not necessarily that you will view fewer or less desirable aspects of opposing views. It's that the battle, the finiteness that it stirs within you will change. You will begin to see the expansiveness of the infinite universe and how there is always and will forever be enough space for all perspectives. That the idea of competition or winning was the illusion. And that from that expansive place, you enter into a harmony with all life and all creation, unlike anything your kind has a conscious memory of sensing. There is enough for all. In fact, there is an infinite amount for all. Our love does not end. Our love does not tire. Our love does not wane. It does not ebb and flow. These are your concepts of a powerful experience that you came here to have. Our love is infinite. And, beloved ones, we would suggest that as you expand from this experience, you will remember that so is yours. Your love is infinite for all creation infinitely. I've been in a very quiet place these last couple of years. It wasn't by design, it wasn't because I planned it, but mostly being unemployed and working on my health and coming to terms with a lot of mysterious spiritual things that have happened to me. Outside of that, my days were very quiet, especially while everyone was at work and school. It was just me and the birds, the sun and the trees. So much space. At times, it felt like too much space. It felt like emptiness. And at other times, it felt like just enough space to allow some pretty big things to come in for a landing. In a quiet space like that, you can almost forget that there are conflicts out there in the world. In my sort of self assumed, self created cave, hermit cave of sorts, you can sort of lose touch, I guess you could say, with a lot of things, with what's going on in the larger global scene, but also what's going on in the lives of friends or acquaintances who you don't really see or talk to. It's just you and your world. Sometimes that's terrifying. Sometimes it's bliss. What exactly are boundaries? As humans, we have this idea of a thing called a boundary, a sort of emotional or figurative wall that we place between ourselves and the things that we either want to protect ourselves from or prevent happening or just want space from, perhaps. We talk about boundaries as being a healthy construct, that it's good to have these sorts of lines of separation between us and perhaps people who demand too much of us, or us and situations that are unsavory to us that we don't want to find ourselves mired in. We put up walls between ourselves and our family members or in laws. We put up walls between us and overly demanding people at our jobs. And woe to the person who has no boundaries, for that person will quickly be lost in a sea of competing interests and opinions here on planet Earth. Today, the chorus brought up two of the most fundamental principles of the game: finiteness and insufficiency. And while at face value, it might feel like that has little to do with boundaries, over time, I realized that actually it has quite a lot to do with it. As the chorus stated today, finiteness and insufficiency are the fundamental tenets of our game, of our experience of limitation. They were the very first beliefs that we manifested in our resonance with these frequencies of disallowance. And by disallowance, as we have been talking about in recent episodes, we mean disallowing the perception of the infinite. So perhaps not surprisingly, two of our most underlying core structures of the game is the idea in finiteness, but also in insufficiency. We don't just believe that things are finite, due to end, due to withdraw, due to deteriorate, due to collapse. Things can't go on forever. We also believe that those things are often not enough, or as the chorus says, just barely enough. And based on my conversations with the chorus, they see these things as relatively the same. Though if you ask a human, what's the difference between not enough and just barely enough? A human will say everything. As usual with the concepts that the chorus is pointing out, these things underlie our existences, construct our perception of our own existences in ways that we are largely still unconscious to. Though we have already awoken to the idea that these are concepts and that potentially things could be infinite and potentially they could be abundant, there are still a great many aspects of this that drive our day-to-day business here in the game unconsciously. So why would the chorus view the insufficiency and the degrees of insufficiency as not enough and just barely enough the same, whereas a human would see the difference between potentially life and death in those things? What's that gap? What's the difference in perspective between how we view this and how the chorus does? You know, I think the best way to talk about this today might actually be to take a tour of planet Earth. And together, we're going to look at these ideas of finiteness and insufficiency from all the angles, from our perspective in the five senses, but also from the chorus's perspective. And maybe by the time we get back, a lot of these things will feel very clear. So let's start. Down the street from me are a couple of kids. So let's just start our journey there since, they're outside playing right now. And they've got all their balls and frisbees and cars and trucks out on the lawn. They're riding their bikes in the street and they hop off the bikes and go back to the balls. And then they run around and etc. And then one of them brings out a truck, a very special truck, a red truck with all sorts of bells and whistles and diggers and things attached. And both boys want to play with the truck. And so, as begin to happen, they start to fight over it. One of them says, it's mine. The other one says, I'd like a turn. The other one gets his turn, but then refuses to give it up. The other one goes and rides his bike for a bit. And the other one's happy now that he has the truck. And then he comes back from his bike riding and insists that now it's his turn and grabs it. The other one says, you forfeited your turn, etc., etc. So you and I are standing there on the sidewalk watching all of this happen. Don't worry, they can't see us. And I say, how do you view finiteness and insufficiency as playing out here? What are they doing that demonstrates it for you? And you say, well, it's pretty obvious. There's just one truck. So there's one truck and two boys. And so they're fighting over who gets to play with the truck. And I say, exactly. From the five senses perspective, what we view on physical wavelengths, basically what we're able to perceive with our eyes and our hands and our ears, potentially, the experience of this truck, there is just one truck. So the truck is finite, and also the truck is insufficient or just barely sufficient, meaning there are ways to split time in order to spread the experience of the truck around, but there is not a way to spread it around at the same time. So as the boys continue to fight, out come the moms, and I say, watch this. So the moms come over and ask what has happened. Each mom feels apologetic to the other mom that their child is not doing very well sharing. And so the moms ensue okay, let's do a better job of sharing, guys. One of the moms takes out her stopwatch and says, you will each get 3 minutes with the truck. Both boys start wailing, 3 minutes, that's not enough. Okay, fine. One of the moms says, we'll do 5 minutes at a turn. And then they start fighting over who gets to go first. And eventually that's resolved. And then the clock starts counting down. And then I say, okay, now how do you view finiteness and insufficiency in this situation? And you might say, well, it's still the same finiteness and it's still the same insufficiency, but now they're each getting turns. And I would say, so they're experiencing the finiteness and the insufficiency in the same way? And you would say, yes. And I would say, okay, so they're both only getting 5 minutes each. And you would say, yeah. And I would say, why does that make a human feel better? And you would say, well, it doesn't really, but it kind of does because it's better than not being able to play with the truck at all. And I would say, yeah, now you're getting closer to the mark. On the five senses, what we would view in that situation about the two boys fighting over the truck is exactly what we described. Two boys, one truck. However, from the chorus's perspective, they view the entire setup for that experience as slightly different. In that experience, you have two humans, two children specifically, who are subjecting themselves to finiteness and insufficiency. Having those beliefs active as they look at the field of toys available to them on the lawn, they will both almost inevitably end up being drawn to something that causes an experience of insufficiency. Meaning, you and I both see a lawn full of toys. Many toys are actually in pairs, 2 bikes, 2 balls, 2 of other things. But eventually, one will pick up the truck, and unconsciously, both of them will activate beliefs about that scarcity, about the idea that there is only one of those trucks there. And so the experience of playing with the truck will naturally draw their attention. They will naturally be drawn to it. And as they fight over the experience of that truck, driven by their perspective, by their active beliefs of finiteness and insufficiency, they will very naturally forget about every other toy on the lawn, every other experience they could have. And from the chorus's vantage point, their own sense of pure desire that would otherwise come into them from beyond the game. Parents of young children will recognize this instantly, that most children are not very interested in playing with a toy until they see another child playing with it. Younger siblings are often the strongest demonstration of this human belief, that they are very content to play with their own toys, but when an older sibling is viewed as playing with something, that child naturally wants to play with it too. For the most part, in the human consciousness, we chalk this up to a desire to be like the older child, to mimic, to be drawn to the idea of being older and therefore more powerful, more capable in the five senses environment. But actually, it's far more simple. The child is experiencing some of the first physically manifested experiences of this idea of scarcity. The child does not consciously say, I'm going to look across this entire room of toys and I'm going to really be drawn to the one that I can't have. The child just does so. This often continues through human childhood in different stages over the course of several years, in which children grapple with or have powerful manifestations of being keenly aware of the things that they cannot have. It does not matter that they have an entire bookshelf full of books. They are upset about the story that you somehow misplaced and cannot find. It does not matter that they are surrounded by loving relatives. They are upset about the relative who is missing. It does not matter that they have a plate full of food in front of them that typically every other night of the week they enjoy. They are upset about the one other type of food that they love that you did not serve them. So, yes to both, as usual. Yes, one truck, two boys. But also, two humans who naturally ended up in the middle of the lawn fighting over that one red truck. Shall we move on? Terrific. This time, let's fly over to the other side of the world, where I believe it's already evening. And out of a great sea of houses, we pick one house in particular and we land softly in the backyard. The sun has already set. The children are already in bed, dreaming about an endless sea of red trucks. And in this particular house, it's a woman who lives alone, and she's sitting down and watching the news at the end of a day. Shall we watch what happens? As we look through the window, we can see that she's finished cleaning up her kitchen and is now sitting down on the couch to the evening news. Now, because of some special powers that you and I have, not only are we able to see the human woman as she's watching the show in terms of her body position, her facial expressions, and things of that nature, but we can also see some energetic aspects of her as she continues to watch the show. As we watch her watching the news, we notice that there are changes in her demeanor and in her energy. As she watches, there is a sort of clenching in her stomach. There is a frowning about her face, a tightening of her jaw, and a sort of raising of the heart rate. Also, energetically, you begin to notice a confluence of energy around her, all sorts of swirling patterns. Some of the energy seems bright and fresh, and some of the energy seems to recycle itself about her in a sort of endless swirl. After a time, I turn to you and I say, what do you think is happening to her in terms of finiteness and insufficiency? Now, since you and I are both new to interpreting energetic perceptions, we instead turn to the five senses manifestations of her body language. And you say, well, something's making her really tense. So I'm guessing that she is worried over something that's finite and insufficient. And I say, terrifically perceived. What has she been watching on the news? You turn to the television, and for the first time, you start to notice what the news program is about. In this particular case, it is about some let's say, political news, that there are some groups in her country's government who are very much divided on the way a thing should play out. And these political factions have been battling each other, so to speak, in government circles over how best to do this. The country also seems very divided. So you have voters on one side who support the views of one party, and you have voters on another side who support the views of another party. And to make this example even more visceral, let's tell you what the news program is actually about and what these political parties are divided over. It's race. That one party views a lot of problems in that country at that time as due to the way a particular race is behaving. And the other party views many of the problems that that race has been facing as part of a broken structure in the country itself that has done nothing to resolve the challenges that these people face. And so the anger is boiling over from both sides, both in the perceived actions of this group of people being defined by race, and also in the perceived systemic structures that give this group of people little other choice and have done so for a perceived long period of time. Perhaps now you understand why the woman had a clenched jaw or a clenched stomach, because perhaps even in my description of a generalized version of this topic, you are resonating with it. So now that you know what the news program is about that she was watching, how do you think this all relates to finiteness and insufficiency? Then you would say, well, I don't know. I mean, clearly there's two differing views on this, and there's only really one way to solve it. I mean, there's only so many tax dollars, there's only so many ways that you can change this. And if you change it in some ways, it'll affect some people negatively. Perhaps they don't want it. And if you make this decision in another way, it'll affect other people. And, so it's a tough decision to make. It's hard to know how to fix all of it. And I say, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is, particularly if you only see one possible way of solving it. And you say, yeah, right, it's finite. And I say, but keep going a little further. And you say, what do you mean? I say, well, you started to say something there about, if you solve it one way, some people will be negatively affected. If you solve it another way, other people will. What was that about? And you say, oh, well, some of the proposed solutions might impact communities or people's jobs or how much they get paid or how they can do their jobs. It'll have impacts. And I say, absolutely, of course it will. But what was it about some of those people will be impacted negatively? And you say, well, sometimes when there are differing interests, different ways to solve things mean it will negatively impact other people. I mean, you can't just have a solution that works for all people all the time, can you? I don't know, I say. Maybe you can. And you say, well, we don't have many examples of that here. And I say, absolutely correct. We do not. From the chorus's perspective, the conflict over how to solve a perceived problem is another great example of the unconscious way that finiteness and insufficiency structures the way we interact with our environment. That all the solutions that we come up with will more naturally than not be incomplete. Meaning, for every proposal we make about how to resolve something for a group of people, that solution will be insufficient for another group of people that our mental capacities had been unable to account for. This is a perfect instrument of the implementation of finiteness and insufficiency, that our minds are unable to handle an infinite number of possibilities. As we've talked about in previous episodes, our denial here, our inability to perceive the infinite, is the construct of the experience of limitation. And so we embody that in all experiences that we have here, up until recently, of course, as we've started to awaken. And so, without our even conscious say so, as we walk into a conflict, a problem, and with very well meaning intention try to resolve it, those solutions will inevitably be incomplete. It would be impossible for us, up until recently, to, from our perspective in the five senses, in this experience of limitation, to create a solution of completeness, of infiniteness, of infinite applicability. Do we turn to each other and we say, I like where your solution's going, but it's not yet infinite? Do we say, let's try again, it's not quite complete? Often not. Humanity instead does what it knows how to do, which is to move around five senses manifestations. That is, to move around the objections, the agreements, the desires, the logistics of all the existing perspectives and manifestations into new and different packages, trying to create a complete solution. And, I point out, this usually gets worse the more antagonistic the relationship is between the two parties. And you look at me and you say, but why would that be? I say, well, as we've talked about before, love, from the chorus's perspective, is allowing. It's not finding something pleasing or something you like. It's simply a sort of trust, a flowing, an allowing of all that something is. And from that vantage point, you are able to see more of the infinite in that other person or that other thing. If you have two parties that are closer in energetic proximity to love, that is, to allowing, they are more likely to approach a complete solution than a human who is more energized in the experience of incomplete. When you have two parties that are antagonistic, meaning they are very much not in a sense of love or in a sense of allowing of the other party, perhaps instead they are activated on prevention or protection. They are trying as much as possible to hold the other party at arm's length from them and just shut them down or contain them or defeat them. It is far more likely that from that perspective, the solution that they come to will be incomplete. I say, look at the woman. Energetically, what's happening around her? Does it look like flow? And you say, no, I mean, I can't see much, but a lot of it looks like it's swirling, not passing through, I guess you could say. And I say, exactly. She is energizing and re-energizing and re-energizing existent limiting beliefs about this issue and about the people involved. She is feeling scarcity. She is feeling insecure, danger, risk. She is feeling that she must do more to prevent this other party from moving forward in their solution. She feels that as part of being an incomplete solution, that the things that she cares about will naturally be damaged, inhibited, or destroyed in some way. And so all those beliefs of finiteness and insufficiency that underlie everything I just listed are all being activated right now. And then I ask you a most important question. I say, what do you think will happen for her if those things keep going? if she keeps feeling like she has to prevent, she has to protect, she has to stop these things from happening in order to preserve her own life and her own way of being? You think about it for a second and you say, I don't know, I think she'd probably do something. She'd probably do more. She'd probably, I don't know, get involved somehow. And I say, that is exactly right. And now let's make our third and final stop of our tour. So we fly to another country, not too far away. It's still night. And as we approach, you hear thunderous booms and explosions, and you see fire and you hear yelling. And I say, all right, that's close enough. Let's watch from way up here. And as you look down below, far below us in the night, you see shadows running around, trucks and tanks. You turn to me and you say, but this is a battlefield. And I say, yeah, it is. And I say, how do you think they're experiencing finiteness and insufficiency right now? And you say, but I don't even know where I am. I don't know what country this is. I don't even know what this war is about. What are they fighting over? And then I say, would you like me to tell you? And you say, yeah, I guess so. And I say, they're fighting over land. They're fighting over the right to live on and to do what they want on land. This land in particular, I say as I point down below us. And you say, well, gosh. I guess it's pretty obvious. The land, if they really like this land, is finite. There's not enough of it to go around. And, so they're fighting over it. It's an insufficient amount of land maybe for all the people who want to live here and do different things with it. So, yeah, seems like a war over finite and insufficient amounts of land. And I say, you are totally right. And also, at one point, these people took turns. And then at one point, they argued about it with words. Then at one point, they started making policies that were covered on the news. And some of these people didn't even really care or know it was happening before that point. But once they started watching it on the news, they started to really care and they started to get involved. They felt like they had to prevent whatever it was that they viewed as being not what they desired from happening. And then they became more and more fearful, more and more worried that this other side, this other faction was growing too powerful, was having too much control, was holding too much of the land. And so they started to fight even further. And one day they picked up guns, and then another day they picked up tanks, fighter jets. And now they are having the human experience of war. And you say, gosh, that's such a shame. And I say, yeah? Why do you say that? And you say, well, they couldn't work it out. That they had to, fight. And people are going to lose loved ones and they're going to lose buildings and history and they're going to lose all sorts of things. And I say, oh, yeah, you're right. That's finiteness and insufficiency. And you say, you mean the war is? And I say, no, the idea of loss. And you say, what? And I say, yeah, actually. That we believe that things are finite, that they end, that they are over, that they disappear, and that we lose them. That idea of loss is our idea. And, a lot of things culminate here to give us the experience of that, or have done. We're awakening from this stuff. And you say, hold on a second. Those people are awakening? The ones with the guns? I say, oh yeah. Some of them more than others. Gun doesn't really have anything to do with it. And you say, how is that? And I say, well, put on your energy goggles. Let's have a look. So we start to look at the energetic aspects of all the chaos going on below us. And for some characters, you notice beautiful fine points of light that are reaching up and beyond them, in addition to the swirling patterns that recreate, recreate, recreate. And by way of those energetic threads that reach up and out, these people are aware of possibility. They're aware of things like peace. They're aware of things like harmony. They're aware of things that could be. And I say, see all those threads of light? Those are all humans who are awakening. I say, but then why are they fighting? I don't get it. If they are starting to perceive more of the infinite, why are they blowing up somebody else? And I say, well, for a time, they're both. They get to have the experience of both. As they perceive this potential, this possibility for a world that is incredible, where they can readily receive all things that they desire, where they have freedom, where they do not need to feel afraid of anything ever again, where they have flow and energy and love. They perceive all of that so strongly as if it was almost real. And then that perception gets molded through, reacted by, however you want to say it, the five senses perspective. And so they look around at what's manifested on the five senses and they say, I don't see it. I don't see how any of this equates to that expansive place that I am sensing. And then it all gets activated. And you say, what do you mean? What gets activated? And I say, all of it. The entire game board. All our beliefs of limitation, that it's finite, that it's insufficient, that they're not in control, that they can't trust, that they have to prevent and protect, all of it. All of our human beliefs. And then you look down at the scene below us and you say, so in order to get to that, they think they have to fight. And I say, yeah, you get it. They think they have to fight because they believe in loss. They believe that losing is a real and vital possibility, so much so that they must prevent its appearance at every turn, or else they will lose a perfect, powerful, and incredible experience of finiteness and insufficiency. Come on, let's go. As we fly home and you're thinking about everything we've just seen and learned, you might be starting to feel a little bit like this is all a lot bigger and a lot more underlying than you had perhaps realized. And you turn to me and you say, but what do we do? And I say, oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Because, as we've been talking about in recent episodes, the idea of needing to do is actually a very important thing. Remember, it's the collision between a very, very broad, far reaching energetic perception the recognition on the five senses that it hasn't come about yet. And then, of course, the activation of beliefs that you got to move stuff around in physical space in order to make stuff happen. And so, because you can ask that, it means something very important. And you say, "What's that?" And I say, "It means you're perceiving it. You're perceiving what's coming next. You're perceiving something beyond finiteness and insufficiency and everything we just took a tour of. You know that something else is possible. You were not completely consumed by the two kids fighting on the lawn, by the woman getting angry on her couch, by the people at war. You were able to form a perception of those things, a concept, an understanding, which means something incredible." And you say, "What's that?" And I say, "That you're already expanding off the game." I'm going to say something a little controversial, but I think it's important, and I'm saying it out of love. Most people who are in conflict today are having an unconscious experience of our beliefs of limitation. They're not doing it because they're awful. They're not doing it because they're depraved, sad little humans who haven't expanded yet. They're not doing it because karma and payback from the universe. They're not doing it for any other reason other than the most powerful reason of all, which is that they came here to have an experience of limitation just like all of us. And that by our choice to resonate here and to be here, we are expanding ourselves and others in our understanding and experience of creation in ways that are profound and indescribable, but that we are rapidly heading into the understanding of. Those two children on the lawn fighting over a truck do not consciously know that they were both drawn to the one thing that was scarce on the lawn. Those people who watch television shows and get all riled up and frustrated over the state of the world do not understand that they are unconsciously being driven in their perception of those issues to the incomplete aspects of those issues. And the people who have the guns and are firing the shots, no matter whose side they are having the most incredible experience in the galaxy, which is the possibility of loss. All of these beliefs, all of these experiences are undergirded by the two core tenets of our reality, which is finiteness and insufficiency. Some of us are awakening to these things. Some of us are seeing it. Some of us are realizing that something's up. Why does this keep happening? And why do humans keep doing this? What is it about us that leads us to these things? But understand that we are awakening from the perspective within the game. Meaning, sometimes we will be viewing all of this from an expanded perspective, and sometimes we'll still be active in the beliefs. And in doing that, we are able to more consciously recognize our beliefs and the beliefs of others. I understand the impulse to hide, to run away from not only all the chaos in the world, meaning not only running away from a group of people who are awakening, who are perceiving powerful things, and by doing so are having an acute experience of the beliefs of limitation from which they view those expansive desires. I get it. It can feel like chaos and it can feel like nonstop conflict. And so running away from those things, turning them off, avoiding those people, keeping your energy positive is a way to handle that. But I would like to point out an alternate view, one that the chorus brought up today. which is what we are coming to, what we are about to remember, what we are beginning to recall, is that not only is the universe infinite, but so is our capacity to love, meaning to allow everything. And so while there are things inside of us that would tell us, ugh, I cannot handle one more interview with that side, with that person, with those people. I can't handle hearing about them or seeing about them. And so you say, I am turning away from it all. Some might even call that boundaries. You have healthy boundaries. You don't look at all those things. You turn away from the things that you are powerless to do anything about. And so you preserve your mental health. That from the perspective of the chorus, that boundary might be another example of finiteness and insufficiency, because the establishment of that boundary is built upon a foundation of believing that you and your capacity to love all of creation is finite and insufficient. Where we are heading is in an expanded version of self that is so vast and so unlimited that we never, as the chorus said, run out of love, run out of solutions, run out of new ideas, run out of energy. And we sure as shit don't ever run out of tolerance. Tolerance is the idea that you can only stomach so much. That there are some things that naturally you like, there are some things you don't, but you can be ambivalent about, and then there are some things that you just can't tolerate. This concept of tolerating, this concept of tolerance is a human concept. Infinite beings of love don't tolerate. They don't have degrees of love. They don't have degrees of allowing. It's infinite all the time. I think one of the easier ways that we can approach this is in thinking about other people, other ideas, other issues in the world. And when we contemplate, what if the universe was infinite? What if there were infinite solutions, infinite lands, infinite space? Then it wouldn't matter how close your space came to mine. Mine's infinite, and it has room forever for all the things that I prefer, and I am never at risk by coming too close to your infinite space. And that's understandable, and that we can sort of contemplate. And that's great because we've come a long way, trust me, from where we were. But today the chorus is pressing on an even larger idea, which is allowing infinitely all that each of us are. The boundaries that we keep between us and others are simply reflections, a replicated structure, you could say, of the boundaries that we already have within ourselves. Therapists and those in the mental health profession understand this intimately, that their clients often come to them struggling with something because they are on the verge of breaking down an internal wall, that they're allowing a new part of themselves to be heard, to be understood, and to be allowed. We all have boundaries in our lives. This has been a perfect manifestation of our embodiment of finiteness and insufficiency. There are certain things we allow ourselves to think about, certain things we don't. There are certain boundaries that we have in ways of separating responsibilities and desires. That we segment within ourselves the fearful parts of ourselves that we don't really want to hear from every day. In today's modern understanding of these parts, we sort of challenge ourselves to uncover them, to hear them, to do work, whether literally or figuratively, to allow these parts of ourselves through. That understanding is solid. However, as usual, there are other perspectives on this process. And one perspective, that from the chorus, would be that as we are awakening, we will very naturally become aware of the boundaries that we have within ourselves. I'll be honest. When I started working with the chorus, when I started writing the book and then now the podcast over a period of many years, I had a boundary that I did not even know I had until recently, which went something like this. Spiritual stuff, that's okay. Religious stuff, that's okay. Contemplating life and humans and why we're here, yeah, that's all okay. Aliens? No, that's not okay. That's amusement. That's entertainment. It's probably true. It's probably going to happen at some point in time, but I am not going anywhere near that. That's a little too out there. That's a little too ridiculous. It's a little too, I don't know, busy with all sorts of people who are kind of cuckoo and crazy and out there. And, none of it's grounded in science and blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's not logic that's talking, it's a boundary. And our boundaries are structured by rational thought, by allowed manifestations, by agreeing with concepts that are agreed to by the whole mass. Boundaries are noisy. Boundaries sound well thought through. Boundaries sound assured and almost unquestionable. They have often been there all along without our even knowing that they were. Until you come to a point in your spiritual awakening where you realize that you're standing at the foot of a boundary that you didn't even know was there. It's only in the past few episodes that I have understood how much my story intertwines with what some might call extraterrestrial contact, I guess you could say, but to me it's all of it. It's all the things across the boundaries. Spirituality, religion, religious figures, extraterrestrials, beings that are non-physical, beings that are. All of these things relate to something that underlies all the boundaries and what they're standing on, which is us and our expanding consciousness. All these things that we're coming to a new perspective on and a new understanding of. We do not consciously know when we are turning a blind eye to the boundaries that we have, when we are giving ourselves an incomplete experience of ourselves. But as we awaken to the underlying structures of finiteness and insufficiency, we will start to spot more and more parts of the game board that reflect this. Pieces of ourselves that were there all along that we didn't even know. And moreover, how much the boundaries are not needed, do not serve a purpose in the ways that they did before when we begin to expand into our more infinite selves, where we are able to love, to experience, to understand infinitely. If you're still with me, then there's one more point I really want to make about today's topic. As we awaken to the ways in which we embody finiteness and insufficiency, one of the things we will start to notice are all the other players who are experiencing it too. That we go from being blind to one of the main ways we're constructed to understanding it and then being able to spot it. I mean, it's like It's like when you finally get interested in a certain type of car and then you start seeing that car everywhere. It's the same thing, but finiteness and insufficiency. One of the most powerful things that the Chorus said today, in my opinion, is that these two tenets, of course, insufficiency and finiteness, underlie the structure for the entire game field. And then they said, most specifically, we would like to say that all players who experience any degree of finiteness and insufficiency are on your game board. They haven't pressed too much on this point before now, but they're starting to. What they are suggesting is that the ways that we have defined ourselves and what it means to be human could be viewed more broadly. That just like we viewed finiteness and insufficiency from the five stances perspective of what we can see and taste and touch and hear and smell, that we have also defined humanity that way. It's pretty simple. Humans have heads and arms and eyes and feet and toes. We have bodies. We have human bodies. And then as some of us have started to have more expansive experiences of other life and other beings, we came up with a concept called humanoid, where, well, there's some slight differences out there. There's gorillas and extraterrestrials and maybe some other stuff too. And so it's not quite human, it's humanoid with these slight variations in the general concept of the body. And the Chorus is taking that concept and is basically blowing it out 10x. And they're saying, if you start to view yourselves from the broader context of everything that you believe, you will start to see similarities with other life and other beings who believe the things that you do. Maybe there are slight variations. Maybe it's a little different here and there. But essentially what they're saying is that any being who experiences finiteness and insufficiency in any flavor is in the game with us. What does that mean? Well, if you're standing in front of a plant and that plant appears to be finite, that means that it dies. It's on the game board with us. What about the things that we are just starting to perceive collectively? What about those other beings that we're just starting to interact with? Well, do any of them believe in insufficiency? Do any of them experience finiteness? Maybe they live hundreds of years longer than us, but they still die. They have a death experience. That's a good manifestation of finiteness. Maybe they don't really die. Maybe they live on and on and on and on. So from our vantage point, pretty much infinitely. But do they experience insufficiency in any way? Do they feel like there's not enough of something? Then they're in the game with us. And what about the Chorus? Do they believe in finiteness and insufficiency? Well, they answered it themselves today, didn't they? They said, our love does not end. Our love does not tire. Our love does not wane. It does not ebb and flow. Our love is infinite. Friends, the game is much, much faster than we had yet realized. And also that means that we have expanded far, far more than maybe we even knew. Because by being here together in the experience of these words, these frequencies, and these perspectives, you and I and all of us are already experiencing, connecting to, awareness of perspectives that are beyond the game. Now, for you advanced players out there, a question might have just popped into your mind. Does the game ever end? If finiteness and insufficiency is our perspective from the game, then which side of the fence is the game on? Great question. From the perspective of the chorus, no, the game doesn't end. All frequencies, all places of understanding exist infinitely. And there are going to be players long after us who will benefit by the experience of this game. It's here for whoever and whenever someone wants to experience it. Are we forever trapped in the game infinitely? Well, trapped would be a human concept. Perhaps the best way to answer it is to say something like this. The infinite universe has given you infinite power to experience anything and everything that you want for as long as you want to, infinitely. If you want to move on from this game, all the forces in the universe support you in that choice. Well, I think that's enough for today. We're out of groceries, so I got to get down to the grocery store. We're out of everything from milk, bananas, oranges, toilet paper. Oh man, we're out of toilet paper. We're probably out of gas. So much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information, check out our website at katieandthechorus.com. There you will find show quotes, episode transcripts, details on our book, The Book of Human Awakening, as well as our newsletter sign up. Visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.